All right, let's go. Jake Fletcher here, Fletcher Group, Remax Advanced Realty in Miami, Florida, bringing you guys the top national real estate news every single week at the top of the broadcast, followed by the top Florida real estate news at the end of the broadcast. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it here. Some interesting stories today. We're starting off with the FHA. FHA extends forbearance. Requests accepted until December 31st now. So this is coming from the Florida Realtors. Basically, that whole forbearance thing that happened because of the pandemic, they're extending the deadline that they're accepting requests for forbearance until December 31st instead of the end of October. So let's jump into it here. Homeowners facing financial challenge caused by the pandemic now have until December 31st to request forbearance if they have an FHA loan. A forbearance approval would allow them to avoid monthly payments in increments that could potentially last up to a full year. So FHA is the Federal Housing Administration. Those are your first-time home buyer loans where people put down 3.5%. It doesn't have to be a first-time home buyer loan, but a lot of them are. That's what they're most commonly known for. So the FHA loans, the Federal Housing Administration is the one who is extending their deadlines. This isn't for conventional loans or private money or anything like that. So they announced they're extending the date for single-family homeowners with FHA-insured mortgages to request at initial forbearance from their mortgage servicer. An approved request would initially allow them to avoid mortgage payments for up to 6 months with the possibility of extending it up to 1 year. The offer applies to homeowners experiencing financial hardship as a result of COVID-19. Window to request assistance from the mortgage servicer was slated to expire at the end of October, but FHA says they can now request up to December 31st. Quote, "I can't stress enough that this relief should be reserved for those that need it most," says Ben Carson, Secretary of Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. "Americans who are capable of paying their mortgage on time should do so. The great American comeback is in full force. If we work together, we can achieve and even surpass the economic prosperity we saw prior to the pandemic." FHA requires mortgage servicers to provide up to 6 months of COVID-19 forbearance if a homeowner requests the assistance and up to an additional 6 months if homeowners request an extension. Homeowners can obtain forbearance approval only from their mortgage service company. Quote, "Our goal is to make sure that no homeowner loses their home unnecessarily as a result of this pandemic," says Assistant Secretary of Housing and Federal Housing Commissioner Dana Wade. FHA mortgage service requirements offer homeowners with FHA-insured mortgages mortgage payment forbearance when the homeowner requests it, with the option to extend the forbearance up to a year in total. FHA does not require a lump sum payment at the end of forbearance. That's also known as a balloon payment. Assess homeowners who receive COVID-19 forbearance for special COVID-19 national emergency standalone partial claim, which could suspend mortgage payment amounts owed into a junior lien. That junior lien is only repaid when the homeowner sells the home, refinances the mortgage, or otherwise extinguishes. Assess if homeowners not eligible for COVID-19 national emergency standalone partial claim would be eligible for one of FHA's COVID-19 expanded home retention solutions announced on July 8th, 2020. So I think that this is a good call by the FHA. I think that it's very important for a lot of these government entities that are trying to help kind of quell a little bit of or at least mitigate some of the disaster caused for many people in many people's lives because of COVID-19. At first, when this all first started happening in March, April, they were planning on making everyone do balloon payments who went into forbearance, which a balloon payment is, as they said, there is like paying a lump sum. You basically pay interest only in a balloon payment. What these were is deferring all of the payment until the very end of the year, and then you would pay everything that you owed during that year all at once. So it's kind of a balloon payment, but different in the sense that you're not paying anything. You're not even paying interest. So it's not an interest-only loan. It's just basically like they say, you pay the full amount at the end of that year. And that scared a lot of people. Then they came out and said, hey, no, actually, we're going to tack it onto the back of the loan. Now they're coming out and basically they have a lot of different options to help people out. They've kind of analyzed the scenario from their end, from these different lenders' ends, and tried to figure out scenarios that work best for them and work for homeowners. And honestly, I think they're doing a good job. I think the last number I saw was like 5 or 6%. I think it was 5% of homeowners are in forbearance now, versus a couple weeks ago it was 6%. So it definitely keeps going down. And there also were some people who were kind of taking advantage of it, which I think is why Ben Carson was making that statement up here about people who need it most, because there were really not a lot of regulations around who could use it at a certain point. And they were just basically saying, hey, anyone can take forbearance. And so naturally, a lot of people, who are smart at making financial decisions were like, why would I pay if I don't have to pay? So they went into forbearance. That obviously doesn't help the lenders out, but it does help those people out. And, not making a comment whether I think that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's definitely understandable why some people would have taken that option. It's basically like free money. If you don't have to pay now, you can use that money for other stuff. It has more, power in other investments, make you more money in other investments, and, than it would just paying your mortgage off. So makes sense. So coming up next, this story is coming from FloridaRealtors.org. CDC eviction ban stops only physical tenant removal. Here's a look at the U.S. Center for Disease Control's list of frequently asked questions about the eviction moratorium. Washington. U.S. Center for Disease Control, the CDC, issued a list of frequently asked questions about its eviction moratorium that runs until December 31st, 2020. It clarifies that the judicial part of the eviction process can be carried out according to state and local laws and rules, and that if the eviction does not include foreclosure on a home mortgage. According to the CDC, the facts aren't a comprehensive summary of the duties and obligations under the order, but simply guidance. Still, the facts state that the order isn't intended to prevent landlords from starting eviction proceedings, provided that the actual eviction of a covered person for non-payment of rent does not take place during the period of the order. The details are covered in the second question. What does CDC mean by eviction? The order also provides more information on the people covered by the eviction order and how they must use the protection, along with a link to a form CDC created that tenants can fill out. It states that tenants must continue to fulfill their obligations during the eviction ban, including any rental payments. So this has been a very interesting kind of developing story through the pandemic. A lot of renters, they thought since there was an eviction ban that they didn't have to pay rent. Of course, landlords, not all of them are, most of them are mom and pop investors like we've talked about in the past, and not all of them were able to just easily cover that missed rent. And so it puts them in a rock and a hard place between the lenders and the tenants. So the CDC's eviction ban, it's the federal eviction ban, and then different states had different eviction bans. And the CDC is the one who is essentially they're the ones who are kind of fleshing out the federal policy on the eviction ban. It's not really the CDC's ban. It's the federal government ban, but it's being informed by and essentially shaped by CDC guidance. So, I'm conflicted about this story, very conflicted, because on one hand, I understand the tenant's scenario, having been somebody who rented for many, 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 many years, and I was poor for many, many years as well, and living month to month, week to week. I can totally understand that plight. I don't think that it's a good idea, no matter what, to completely stop paying your rent. I think the right route for tenants to go is to contact your landlord and tell them, hey, look, I'm having a really tough time. What can we do? And try to figure it out with your landlord. Now, on the other hand, I also feel for the landlords because, like I said, mom and pops are most of them, and if they have tenants stopping to pay rent, that's got to come out of somewhere, right? And it also puts a lot of requirements onto the landlord. If they do decide to go in forbearance, there's extra steps they have to do to track the financials of everything for 5 years, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's like red tape on top of that. And another thing that has come out recently is I forget exactly what the source of this is. I'll try to find it and put it in the description. But there was a source that was citing, basically they did some research and found that for every 60 evictions would equal 1 death of coronavirus. So essentially what that means is the more you put people out of their homes, the more at risk people become. So as there are more and more housing challenged and homeless people, then you're putting more people on the streets who may potentially have COVID, and then spreading it and to other people and contracting it to, and ultimately potentially dying from it. So based on the analysis of 60 every 60 evictions equals 1 death, we would end up with like an extra 90,000 something deaths just from the potential impact of this eviction crisis that we're kind of staring down the barrel of. So that's a really little talked about aspect of all this, is the public health impact of this eviction crisis and ending this eviction ban. So there's no clear-cut answer because everybody's in a tough spot. I think one thing I can say for sure is I don't think that the federal government's doing enough to help either tenants or landlords. I would like to, and a lot of people would like to see a lot more being done about that. So we will continue to monitor this story and see. Next story is coming from Inman.com. 62% of homeowners support low-income housing in their neighborhoods. So this is contrary to what a lot of people might think. According to Redfin's latest survey, a majority of Americans embrace low-income developments in their neighborhood. However, concerns still abound. Housing has become a hot-button issue during the 2020 presidential race due to a coronavirus-induced economic fallout that has pushed more than 8 million Americans into poverty. As concerns about mass evictions and foreclosures abound, more homeowners are embracing the idea of low-income developments in their neighborhoods. According to Redfin's latest survey published on Thursday, 62% of 1,400 homeowners, home buyers, and home sellers say they support the development of low-income housing, which includes affordable mid-grade townhomes and apartments. Meanwhile, 38% said they were against low-income developments in their area, a 1% decrease from 2019. So people are actually trending towards warming up to the idea of low-income housing. Quote, although research indicates that low-income housing doesn't increase crime or substantially reduce nearby property values, there's still a misconception that housing for low-income people degrades a neighborhood, Redfin chief economist Daryl Fairweather said in a written statement. People who live in urban areas are less likely to harbor the misconception, likely because they already live among a more economically diverse population. What kind of buildings do you not want to see built within or near your neighborhood? So red is overall, blue is city, gray is rural, and orange is suburban. So this is these are the areas that the people live in who are responding, right? So overall averages people from the cities, rural and suburb, right? So low income housing, affordable housing in the form of mid-grade townhomes, apartments. So 31% people in cities do not want to see that. 45% in rural, 44% in suburban areas, and 38% overall. So clearly, that makes sense to me. I'm actually surprised that the suburban number was lower than the rural number, because I mean, rural, you got so much space. Like, come on, you got miles and acres of farmland. I mean, what's it gonna hurt, right? So, but very small percentages. So, shopping center, strip mall, one structure with individual units rented out by store vendors typically includes parking. So you got 34% overall, 29% in cities, 43 rural, and 37 suburban. Office building 2 or 3 stories tall typically includes a parking lot. Again, we see similar numbers there to the shopping center. Luxury condo, glass and steel building at least 4 stories tall. You got 24% overall, 23% city, of course, 28% rural, which I'm surprised it's that low, and 23% for suburban, which is interesting that it's the same as cities. I would not mind if any of the above were built in my neighborhood. So 20% for total, 19% city, 24% rural, 21% suburban. Townhome, row house, that you guys know what that is. So 19% city, 27% rural, and 18% suburban, which is interesting that, suburban people are more open to the townhomes than city dwellers. Which I guess that makes sense. You see more like suburban townhomes. So 3-story modern detached single-family home design typically includes squared edges, tall windows, flat roof. So pretty similar numbers all around, except rural people seem very resistant to change, right? Of what they're used to. They should have done like a farmhouse, one just to see. Americans who live in suburban and rural areas were most likely to oppose low-income housing developments. Beyond the housing, rural and suburban residents also more likely to oppose other building types such as new shopping centers and office buildings like we talked about. Beyond location, there's a clear divide in the support of or opposition of low-income housing developments between political parties and races. Voters in swing states, 43%, and red states, 41%, are more likely to oppose low-income housing than voters in blue states, 33%. Interesting that the swing states were actually more than the red states, because you would think it would be a little bit more mixed, a little bit more split, but apparently not. Quote, Biden is focused on housing policies on supporting low-income Americans who have been excluded from certain neighborhoods because they can't afford housing, Fairweather explained. In contrast, President Trump is responding to the anxiety some people feel about low-income housing entering their neighborhoods. This is him saying that how he's saved the suburbs and so on and so forth, which may be a bigger issue in red states and the collection of swing states that matter most in this year's election, according to the survey. What kind of buildings do you not want to see built within or near your neighborhood, right? So here we have it going along racial boundaries, right? Overall, white is blue, the blue one. Black people are represented by gray, Hispanic is orange, Asians green. So low-income housing, affordable housing in the form of mid-grade townhomes apartments is similar. So white people 41% of white people were resistant against that. 26% of black people, 33% of Hispanic, 35% of Asian. So big disparity there. I mean, that's pretty significant. We can kind of skip the rest. You guys get the point of this. If you want to pause it and take a look, you can. But we're going to keep on going. So when it comes to race, white people are more likely to oppose low-income housing developments, followed by Asian people, Hispanic. Black people are least likely to oppose, 26% saying they don't want low-income housing in the neighborhood. The battle over low-income housing is far from over, Fairweather said, as President Trump's administration has gutted the Department of Housing and Urban Development's role in enforcing affirmatively furthering fair housing, a rule that requires local governments who receive federal block grants to research and dismantle segregation patterns in their area. If elected, Biden has promised to strengthen the AFFH rule and reinstate the process and procedures established during President Obama's term. Furthermore, Biden has created a $640 billion budget to combat America's housing issues, including the dearth of low-income housing and affordable housing for the middle class. Now, as we've talked about in past stories, one thing making this harder to create affordable housing is the increase in building supplies, increase in cost of building supplies, rather, with lumber up. I think it's I think the last number I saw on lumber was it was up like 16%, something along those lines, which makes a big difference in your bottom line as a developer. So, quote, building different types of housing in suburban, urban, and rural neighborhoods alike helps to desegregate communities, which is one of the first steps in combating systemic racism and other inequalities, Fairweather continued. Quote, passing national zoning reform and requiring all neighborhood types to allow affordable housing could help close the gaps in education, homeownership, and wealth. So, I mean, yeah, I don't think that that's like the end-all be-all, but I definitely agree that, national zoning reform, requiring, I actually don't agree with requiring all neighborhood types to allow affordable housing. Now, here's the thing. I very much agree with the need for affordable housing, the push for affordable housing. I think that the government should be involved in allocating resources and also involved in helping to subsidize the creation of those types of housing. To what extent is up for debate, but I do think that there is a role for the federal government in that, as well as state and local governments. However, let's think about what's actually being said there, okay? So requiring all neighborhood types to allow affordable housing. So that's like saying, going into a country club, right? And saying, hey, you need to allow apartment building of low income housing inside of your country club. To some people that might sound like, well, yeah, duh, they should. But to other people, they're moving into that country club because there is a certain aesthetic to the country club in terms of the architecture, in terms of the amenities that are offered, in terms of the privacy, the traffic, patterns, and maybe lack thereof. There's a lot of reasons people move to places, and I think that even if you flip the scale on this, like let's say you're in a low income area, an economic opportunity zone, and let's say it's zoned for apartment buildings, and then you say, well, hey, you also need to let me build a single family home in the middle of this urban block. That doesn't make sense, right? So I think this is a little bit of a carte blanche approach, and I think that instead of saying, hey, we should just require all neighborhood types to allow affordable housing, is a stretch. It's a stretch because it just doesn't work like that, in practice. But I do think that more affordable housing, you're going to get better results in terms of education, percentage of home ownerships in the different racial classes and economic classes, and another thing too is I think that this is a topic that gets highly stigmatized along political boundaries, but it's really not. This is a humanitarian issue. We're all countrymen, right? We're all Americans, if you're an American watching this. But if you're an American, we're all countrymen. Whether you like somebody or not, it doesn't matter. We all share this land. We share this country. We share a culture. And I think that I think we do have a responsibility to care about our neighbors, and do the best that we can for our country. And I think that includes taking the time and resources to try and help people who are housing challenged or are homeless or are being priced out of an area. It's about how these things happen, not whether or not they happen, because you're never going to stop gentrification per se, but you can influence the way in which it happens. And I think that's the important topic to keep in mind when speaking about gentrification is the topic of how is it happening? How are these things being mitigated? How are the people who are being priced out of the areas being helped along to get to where they need to be without being a detriment to their life and future? And this is a very big topic. I am very interested in this topic because it is such a difficult topic. There is no right or wrong answer. There's a lot of strong opinions, but I've never met anyone or heard anyone who has all the answers. So I'm interested to hear from you guys in the comments. What do you think? Let me know below. Do you think that reforming zoning laws and requiring, mandating more affordable housing, or requiring all neighborhoods to have affordable housing or allow affordable housing, do you think those are the answers to gentrification? Do you think there are other answers? What do you think are the answers? And is this a good step? Is it a good step to to strengthen that AFFH rule like Biden is wanting to do, creating more of a budget for helping people in low income. And last couple of things here too, always keep in mind that the word affordable is very subjective. What does affordable mean, right? Are we talking about affordable in terms of a national median income, or are we talking about affordable in terms of a state or local or city, even town median income, right? Because that matters a lot, and it costs different amounts to live in different places, right? And then last thing about this is the better we all do, the better we all will be. Meaning, the more people who are prevented from being homeless and prevented from having to move out of an area because they've been priced out and leave to go, who knows where, the more people are able to contribute to the economy, the more people are able to participate in the economy, and that allows our economy as a whole to be healthier. So there's a very strong economic case that you can make for creating more affordable housing. Look at, I think it was Portland, I want to say, that they did away with homelessness. I think it was Portland. I'll try to find the source and put it in the description, but it was some American town that did away with homelessness by creating affordable housing for people. So essentially making homelessness 0%. And they found that it was actually cheaper for them as a society because they weren't spending as much money on jailing homeless people for vagrancy, which I don't think should be a crime. And they didn't spend as much money on like public funds being used for their hospital bills, for things that could have been prevented by them having a home and being able to have some semblance of a healthy lifestyle. So there's a very large point to be made there about, economic point about, helping all of us do well, helps our economy do well, and then we all do better. So I think that's important to kind of keep in mind. All right, the next story is coming from mortgagenewsdaily.com. Fannie asks mortgage execs how to improve condo lending. So Fannie, of course, is the Federal National Mortgage Association, and the most recent Fannie Mae's Lender Sentiment Survey focuses on the complexities of lending to the condominium market. The company stresses that this type of housing can play an important role in narrowing the supply gap for affordable housing options, as well as providing an attractive alternative for homeowners seeking to downsize. However, since the Great Recession, there has been a significant shortage of both new and existing units for sale. Condos represent 8 to 10% of the mortgage market, but tend to exist primarily and thus play a larger role in many urban areas. They also present unique risks given the financial responsibility owners share for the operation and maintenance of the common areas and shared amenities. Lenders may also face increased time and cost due to complexity of underwriting condo project eligibility, meaning that it takes more time for lenders to kind of analyze the budget, the insurance policy, the condo questionnaire, all these different things that help the lender determine whether or not they feel safe with lending money for somebody to buy a unit in that condo. So Fannie Mae asked more than 200 senior mortgage executives about market trends and to help identify opportunities to streamline or enhance policy and process requirements and thus more effectively manage condo project risks. Most respondents, 86%, said they were currently originating single-family condo mortgages, and 71% saying they expect their share of those loans as a percentage of their loan volume to remain about the same. Approximately 40% reported having dedicated condo project approval teams, okay? So they have these teams that are in their underwriting departments that determine whether or not a condo is eligible. So I'll give you guys an example, a little bit of an anecdote of why this is important. So here in Miami-Dade, last time I checked a couple months ago, there was only 3 condominiums that were FHA approved, meaning that the Federal Housing Administration was only able to qualify 3 different condos in Miami-Dade. Now, the reason for that is mostly because the condominiums don't have enough reserves in their budget. So that means that if they had to put new roofs on all the buildings, all the structures, or paint everything or fix the pool or whatever it might be, any type of project, that they wouldn't have enough money to do that. So Fannie Mae sees that as a big no-no in terms of who they want to lend money to naturally, right? So when asked about ways to improve underwriting to minimize risk, lenders named, I think it's supposed to be, 3 risk factors to which they felt secondary market investors should pay more attention. 60% mentioned homeowner association financial stability, like I just mentioned. 33% said oversupply or overvaluation, meaning there's too many units on the market to be absorbed, and they're overpriced. And 31% said deferred maintenance, so they're not in good condition. When asked about risk factors they have become more concerned about over the last year, financial instability was still first at 50%, followed by deferred maintenance 33%, oversupply or overvaluation 28%, and hotel resort use or short-term rentals 24%. So the deferred maintenance, the 33% there, I kind of chalk that up to it's not financial instability, but it relates to the financial instability, because if they weren't financially unstable, then the deferred maintenance of the common areas and things like that wouldn't be happening, and you wouldn't have these issues as far as the common areas and the amenities and things like that. Because I can tell you from experience, sometimes you go into a condo and you can definitely tell they don't have any reserves, because there's, everything's like a mess and dirty and hasn't been attended to in a long time, and the pool is broken and this and that, and nobody wants to live in a unit like that, right? So that deferred maintenance, to me, goes back to the financial instability, which if you add those up, that's 83%, right? So the vast majority. Now, keeping it going, lenders also noted that condo lending involves gathering data from multiple sources, further complicating the process. That makes it harder for their underwriter team to do than it does for an HOA of a single-family home or a single-family home without an HOA. They tend to rely on the sources they consider most useful: HOA questionnaires, appraisals, and approval lists from the GSEs and FHA. Even with the complications involved in condo lending, lenders said the greatest opportunities for improving that lending was in the overall loan origination process, borrower income verifications, appraisals, and loss mitigation workout rather than condo review. So basically what they're saying there is what they believe, what the lenders believe is the best way to make these condos more lendable is to actually improve the process by which they do this. So, the process of verifying the borrower's income, the process of getting these things appraised, the process of figuring out what kind of loss mitigation they should implement. So these processes that they are trying to kind of streamline would help them qualify these condos quicker. So it's not like they're changing their requirements that the condos need to meet in terms of their reserves, but what they're saying is, hey, if we could more quickly vet these condos out, it'll make it a lot easier to lend on condos. Now, I think that is a good point. I also think that, there is room for getting more creative with how they're able to lend on these condos. So let me give you an example. If an HOA, let's say they need 10% reserves in order to fund, in order for a conventional loan to be funded or approved, and they're at 9%, right? If they have an approved and voted on plan from the HOA members or the board or whatever that details how they're going to get to that 10% in the next X number of years or months or whatever, maybe the lenders can take a look at that and say, all right, that meets the guidelines, right? So in other words, if HOAs can come up with a plan of how to increase their financial stability, maybe that's enough for some lenders to get a little bit more creative with how they're structuring deals and help people get into some of these condos, because there is a big oversupply, and a lot of that is because people really want to take advantage of FHA first-time home buyer. 34% of the buyers in the market right now in the U.S. are first-time home buyers, and that's a big help to them, that 3.5% down. But you can't do it if the condo isn't approved to be able to lend on. So that would help out a lot, and there are other things they could potentially do. But this is an interesting thing to see that Fannie Mae is actually taking the step to talk to lenders about what they can do to try and make these condos more lendable. So, since the majority of lenders told Fannie Mae that they plan to maintain at least their current percentage volume of condo lending, any improvements to information gathering and data evaluation should benefit both lenders and borrowers. The company says this is especially critical for condo projects with characteristics that lenders frequently associate with increased risk. Lenders reported that they welcome change that improves the review process and further enhances the evaluation of their risk. Of course they do, because it costs them less money and takes them less time. Lenders reported that they welcome change that improves the review process and further enhances the valuation of their risk position as innovation continues to accelerate enhancements for other prioritized loan origination and servicing processes. So yeah, of course they welcome it, because that's going to take them less time and cost them less money, and ultimately it's going to help the industry too. All right, this next story is coming from Inman.com, and it is rather unfortunate. So, landlords threaten to raise tenants' rent if Biden wins in November. This is crazy, and I don't know if it's illegal or not, but it sounds like maybe it should be. And you know, this is not a partisan story. If you know, I'm not making any type of judgments or, you know, qualifying who I believe in or don't believe in, but you know, if the names had been flipped, you know, the rent and Trump, if Trump wins in November, I would be saying the same thing for sure. I mean, this is horrible because what's going on is a landlord basically sent this letter below to their tenants and told them that if Biden wins, that they're going to basically be doubling their rent. So they're kind of like trying to extort them into voting for Trump. And it doesn't really even make sense. So to all tenants, please understand, if Joe Biden is elected as our next president, everything you do and have to pay for will change completely. I mean, right off the rip, that doesn't make any sense. Why? What? All of a sudden, everything's going to change? Just because, like, when has that ever happened? No, it hasn't. I mean, if anything, maybe the stock market might dip, you know, because Trump has been, you know, very effective at you know, instilling confidence in the markets. And I don't think Joe Biden will instill that same confidence. And so maybe the stock market will dip, but everything you do or have to pay for will change completely. That's ridiculous, ludicrous. So everything will be increased, like paying a lot more in taxes, utilities, gasoline, groceries, new permits, fees, and regulations, everything. I mean, taxes, yeah, if you're making more than $400,000 according to Biden's plan, but probably most people who are making $400,000 a year or more are not renting. They might be renting like luxury houses and stuff like that, but they're not necessarily renting in a place where a landlord is going to leave you a letter like this, right? Utilities, I don't get that, how that's going to go up. You know, I mean, he said he's not going to ban fracking, so I don't get that. Gasoline, I don't see that either. Groceries, new permits, fees, and regulations. I mean, just none of this lines up with what Biden is saying, so I don't get where they're coming from. I think it's a scare tactic. So, and this kind of doubles down on that. So this also means your rent will be increased to cover these expenses. Most likely, rent would double in price. That's insane, and I don't think it's legal in any state to double someone's rent from like 1 month to the next, or even one lease to the next. You know, I mean, maybe there's times and scenarios where it's legal, but in Florida, definitely not. I think it's 7% that you're allowed to raise from 1 year to the next or one lease to the next. If the current president is reelected, we will not raise the rent for at least 2 years. So here they're giving them an incentive. If the current president is reelected, we won't raise the rent for 2 years, which is pretty significant. Voting is your choice, right? So now they're getting into the voting is your choice, right? So it's your choice if you want your rent to double or if you want it to stay the same for 2 years. And we are not telling you how to vote. We are just informing our tenants what we will do according to the election results. So kind of making a threat. If Trump wins, we all win. If Biden wins, we all lose. Again, I don't understand when did we go from people just have different ideas to like the other side is, you know, evil and we all are doomed and like, what? Come on. You know, I mean, Biden is pretty, you know, center. I mean, you know, I'll be honest, neither of these guys are who I would prefer to be in office. I think a lot of people could probably agree with that. But, you know, let's be honest, Biden is not this like left-wing Antifa rebel rousing, you know, Marxist revolutionary. I mean, this is the guy who wrote the crime bill. This is the guy who, you know, he's been taking, you know, he was taking, what do they used to call him? The senator from Amex or something like that, because he used to take so much credit card money. So you know, it doesn't line up with the narrative of, oh, you know, everyone loses, you know. I just don't get it, you know. And again, this isn't an endorsement of one person or the other. I just hate to see this kind of stuff because think if you're one of these tenants and now you're like, damn, dude, if I vote for Biden and he wins, then my rent's going to get doubled. And nobody wants that. I mean, most people can't afford their rent to be doubled. That's ridiculous, you know? So I think this is a really mean-spirited letter. I think if I got this letter from my landlord, even if I agreed with, you know, his point of view, I'd probably be looking for another place to move, just because what if, you know, I don't want my rent to be doubled. What am I going to do, right? So it's really sad, you know. So as election day draws nigh, love when people use that, concerns about voter suppression and intimidation have reached fever pitch as Americans report being purged from voter rolls, waiting 12-hour plus to early vote at limited locations, and placing their votes in unauthorized ballot boxes. That was a story out of California. The Republican Party there was putting fake ballot boxes in Democratic areas. Now, voters in New York and Colorado worry about veiled voter intimidation from their landlords. As reported by the Daily Beast on Wednesday, voters in both states reported receiving letters from their landlords saying they'll raise rents if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win the next November election. Just occurred to me, I wonder if it's the same landlord who owns properties in both states. So who knows? Landlords said Biden and Harris will raise taxes, meaning they'd have to raise rents to compensate for a higher tax bill, according to the Wall Street Journal. So, you know, even again, going back to like, if this landlord's making more than $400,000 a year in income and they are going to get their taxes increased, I mean, yeah, you would think that would mean, okay, maybe rent's going to have to go up a little bit, but what Biden's talking about, and you can go research his tax plan. I looked into it, and what he's talking about is a marginal tax rate, not of, you know, a tax rate for just your income flat out. So what that means is the 400,000 up to 400,000, this landlord would get taxed at whatever the normal percentage would be after he takes his deductions and loopholes and stuff. And then after 400,000, like from $400,001 and up, would be a higher marginal tax rate. So it's not like you're gonna have that crazy of a difference in what you're taking home. So I think that, you know, again, it's just mean-spirited. So. And very politically charged, it seems, and it's a shame. I think no matter what side you're on, I think it's a shame. According to the Wall Street Journal, Biden's tax plan would slice the top 1% of households after income by 16% in 2022, which works out to a $265,000-ish average tax increase. Meanwhile, the middle 20% would experience a 1% tax cut. Households making under $400,000 wouldn't experience a tax increase unless they failed to fulfill the Affordable Care Act health insurance mandate. So yeah, I mean, I guess that, you know, they're keeping the mandate, and, you know, you got to still pay for it and so on and so forth, which, you know, think what you want about it. But, you know, at the end of the day, you're talking about, you know, yeah, 265,000 tax increase, but that's for the top 1%. You know, these are people who are making like millions of dollars every year. So I don't think that's like that big of a tax increase to them. I mean, you know, yeah, it's 16%, but of like tens of millions of dollars, you know? So yeah, interesting. Quote, I would equate receiving this letter from my landlord to my boss sending me a letter telling me who to vote for, New York-based voter John Gordon told the Daily Beast. Gordon said his landlord sent a letter urging him and his fellow tenants to vote for a Republican mayoral candidate. Meanwhile, in Fort Morgan, Colorado, the landlord of a local trailer park sent a more direct warning to his tenants, saying if Biden wins in November, he'll double rent prices to cover an anticipated rise in taxes, utilities, gasoline, grocery, new permits, fees, and regulations, right? So that was that. Yeah, everything will be increased, read the letter, right? We already read that. Most likely rent, yeah, we read that. So they say, quote, I mean, everybody was pretty shocked, honestly. Resident Cindy Marquez told the outlet, it was mainly hurtful, you know. How could someone say something like that or basically threaten us according to something that we can't control? Washington Post published a follow-up to Daily Beast report on Friday detailing more examples of landlords in Mississippi and Florida targeting their tenants for potential political beliefs. According to the Post, Mississippi landlord Wilma Hughes evicted tenant Whitney Wages after Wages made a Facebook post disparaging Trump's handling of the pandemic, amongst other things. So again, man, like, when did we become this country that, like, people are so embroiled about their political beliefs that you're going to kick someone out of their home just over a Facebook post that you disagree? Like, come on, you know, like, talk about a snowflake. Like, god damn. toughen up, right? 30 minutes later, Wages said she received a text from Hughes. She had 45 days to find another place to live since Hughes didn't want to live with a negative person. Come on, dude. Like, oh, you're negative. You got to leave. Like, dude, it's a Facebook post. Just unfollow her on Facebook. Like, if you're really that butthurt by it, it's just unbelievable. The director of University of Mississippi School of Law Housing Clinic, Dezer Intracoastal, said the Wages eviction is unfortunately legal since Mississippi housing policies favor landlords. Quote, is just not a type of discrimination that is unlawful if a private landlord does it. That's crazy that it's not unlawful. Meanwhile, in Florida, landlord Joseph Mazzara was arrested for pulling a Trump sign out of his tenant's yard and injuring her in the process. So even there, right? You guys will see I'm not on one side or the other here. That's horrible. Why are you, even though you own the land, this is the sign, the Trump sign belongs to your tenant. And then you're going to injure her in the process of pulling it out. Like, I guess must have been like a scuffle over it or something. And maybe the metal thing scraped her, cut her, or maybe, who knows, maybe she had to get stitches or something. It's horrible. Like, what are people doing like over politics? Like, come on, like, we're all Americans at the end of the day, and we all got to stick together, despite what happens along political party lines. Although these landlords' actions are frowned upon, political affiliation isn't a protected class under the Civil Rights Act, meaning they can't legally evict tenants of differing political beliefs in most areas without just cause. However, California, the District of Columbia, and Seattle have laws banning arbitrary discrimination and considering political ideology a protected class. I think that it probably should be, because look at what happens in other countries. They have like ethnic cleansing when a regime changes hands. You might say, oh, that'll never happen in America. What are you talking about? But I mean, really? I mean, do you really think that could never happen, that there could never be political violence in America? I mean, we've already kind of seen it, and so I think that people are definitely being targeted over their political ideology, and maybe it should be a protected class. Maybe we should add that to the, to the Civil Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act. Multiple legal experts told the Daily Beast both landlords are not likely to face legal ramifications due to the wording of their letters. I do not believe that such laws would apply unless there was a threat, as in if you don't vote for X, then your rent will go up. So again, I mean, that's like kind of linguistic loopholes. It's like a syntax a loophole based on the syntax. However, voter right advocacy groups have been sending reminders that landlords cannot control their tenants' votes nor intimidate them into sharing who they cast their ballot for. Friendly reminder to voters that their vote is always confidential. Common Cause Colorado tweeted, "No one knows how you vote, including your landlord." Unfortunately, in Florida, that's not true. In Florida, like, everything you do is public information, which is why you get all the crazy arrest stories out of Florida, because the descriptions of the arrests are public information, whereas in most states they're not. And Florida's a crazy place. So last thing I'll say about this is, if you really want a fair election, a free and fair election, then you want to eliminate as much possibility of people influencing other people's vote. You want people to vote who they're going to vote for. No matter what side you're on, we should all be on the side of democracy, right? And liberty and freedom, etc. And you don't have the freedom to force someone else to vote for someone. I mean, that's as un-American as it gets, So all these people out there saying you have to vote for this person, or your rent's going to go up, or you have to vote for that person, or I'm going to come rip your sign out of your lawn and stuff like that. Those people are all missing the point of America, straight up. Next story is coming from the Miami Herald. North Miami Beach rescinds approval of Intracoastal Mall project, schedules a new vote. So this happened on Friday, a day after North Miami Beach commissioners voted to approve Uptown Harbor, a massive mixed-use redevelopment of the Intracoastal Mall. Mayor Anthony DeFilippo announced he was scrapping the results and scheduling another vote to be held at a later date. The motion to reschedule was approved 7-0. Thursday's virtual meeting, which began at 6 p.m., stretched to 2:30, was a contentious affair that included a screaming match, a commissioner who logged off before the final vote was taken, and another commissioner who fell asleep at her desk. At least there was nobody caught with their junk out, if you know what I mean, if you're familiar with that story with Jeffrey Tuber. I have serious concerns I've heard from our community, DeFilippo said in a text message to the Herald. They need more addressing because it was a quasi-judicial meeting. We had one commissioner dropped off due to communication and another fell asleep. There are serious concerns and these forms must be done properly. Quote, our city has had issues with the process in the past and for not following it correctly, DeFilippo said, explaining why he was bringing the project back for reconsideration. DeFilippo was elected in 2018 and is facing a challenger in November 3rd election. His opponent, Bruce Cousins, is running solely out of concern over the project's impact on the nearby Eastern Shores neighborhood, a massive development. Uptown Harbor is a $1.5 billion project that would bring more than 3,000 condos and apartments, 575,000 square feet of office and retail space, and a 100-foot wide canal to the outdoor mall site at 3861 Northeast 163rd Street on the Sunny Isles Causeway. So that's, if you're not familiar with where that is, it's kind of like right in between the Miami-Dade and Broward County lines. It's technically on the Miami-Dade side, I believe, but it's like right on that line. And this is right as you are going from the causeway on the mainland to the beach, right? So, you know, it's interesting that they wanted to put a development there, and now they're having, it's a big development, right? And sorry, my nose is itching today. And then let's go down here. So Dezer Development bought the Intracoastal Mall in 2013 for $63.5 million. The developer took advantage of changes in North Miami Beach's zoning ordinance made in 2015 to increase the density of the project. They wanted to get more units in there. Some of the proposed buildings could rise as high as 40 stories, but in exchange for the increased density, the project is required to provide ingress and egress access to and from the property directly from Northeast 163rd Street. The current plan only allows for a widening of Northeast 35th Avenue, the sole road in and out of Eastern Shores, and a left-hand turn signal to direct traffic onto Northeast 36th Avenue. Today's hearing included two ordinances, approval of the project's master plan and the grant of the land to developer Gil Dezer for 30 years to complete the project. The first ordinance was passed by a vote of 4-3. The second passed a vote 3-2 after the two commissioners had dropped off. Quote, I appreciate that some of my fellow commissioners will now have the opportunity to review the master plan and development deal and realize that it is not to the benefit of the residents of Eastern Shores, and more importantly, it does not meet the traffic requirements, said Commissioner Fortuna Smuckler, who voted against both ordinances. Other commissioners were annoyed by the idea of having to start the entire process of reviewing the project from the beginning. Boo-hoo. We have to go through, I'm not even going to read that because who cares about them and their feelings. This is your job. To be clear, the city of North Miami Beach did not rescind their approval, but made a motion to reconsider given that two of the commissioners fell asleep or became unavailable. We'll make sure they have coffee at the next hearing, thankfully, right? So this is a little image rendering of what this would look like. You know, I don't really have a strong opinion on this story as of right now. I mean, I think that they should do whatever they deem to be the right thing. I've never lived in that neighborhood in North Miami, North Miami Beach, so I don't really have like a very strong opinion on it, but my instinct tells me overall, usually development is a good thing. But I also feel like there's a very large oversupply of condos in the North Miami Beach and Sunny Isles, especially Sunny Isles areas. So if you're building more kind of like luxury condos, I don't know how you're going to be expecting them to be absorbed into the market, honestly. So from a simply financial standpoint, it might not be the best decision for the developer. But I mean, Gil Dezer is a big developer, so I'm sure they've done their risk analysis and have assessed that it's a good idea. So, last story of the day is also coming from the Miami Herald. To fight gentrification, a working-class Miami enclave wins plans to spur development. So we're talking about Wynwood, more specifically Wynwood Norte, which is North Wynwood, just north of Wynwood. Residents and property owners who banded together in a newly rechristened working-class neighborhood of Wynwood Norte have won Miami commissioners' enthusiastic approval for an innovative plan that would tame looming gentrification by spurring development. I mean, this not looming gentrification anymore. It's already like it's been happening. But you know, that neighborhood neighborhood specifically still has a little more of a ways to go than Wynwood, I suppose. So the Wynwood Norte Neighborhood Revitalization District, a special zoning plan approved on first reading by a 5-0 vote on Thursday, arose from a grassroots effort to reverse the historic residential enclave's declining fortunes. The compact, low-income neighborhood of around 4,000 people has bled population and been mostly overlooked as its better-known southern neighbor, the Wynwood Arts and Entertainment Warehouse District, undergoes a red-hot redevelopment boom. The so-called NRD2, drawn up by the city planners based on a vision plan developed by a Wynwood Norte Neighborhood Association, takes an unusual and seemingly counterintuitive approach that sponsors hope will be a model for other distressed urban areas where residents are at risk of displacement, redevelopment, gentrification, and a shrinking supply of affordable housing. The plan seeks to attract badly needed investment to the neighborhood plagued by demolitions and vacant or abandoned lots and buildings by promoting modestly larger and denser but still small-scale infill development through an extensive upzoning. In exchange for the greater capacity to build across most of the enclave's 140 acres, developers would provide a significant supply of new affordable housing to help pay for enhancements like new street lighting, shade trees, and sidewalks. The upzoning would also allow Miami-Dade County's housing agency, which owns several acres of underused land in the neighborhood, to expand its local stock of affordable and workforce housing. To encourage business formation, the new zoning would allow establishment of micro retail and incubator spaces. At the same time, the plan aims to preserve the core and character of the neighborhood by placing stricter limits on demolitions and maintaining a low scale in residential areas. Property owners seeking to demolish a house or building would need to have a permit in hand for new construction, a measure intended to stop the commonplace practice by real estate speculators of vacating and tearing down unusable homes and buildings to flip the empty land for a higher price. The neighborhood wish list was put on the path to realization last year when City Commission adopted it unanimously. At the urging of Commission Chairman Keon Hardeman, the Commission also instructed the City Planning Department to translate the vision into zoning legislation. On Thursday, the often fractious Commission embraced the rezoning plan with no debate and some fulsome praise for Hardeman, who must resign his seat because he's in a runoff election next month for Miami-Dade County Commission seat against Haitian American activist, I'm going to butcher this, Gepsi Metellus. Maybe I got it. The enthused unanimity virtually guarantees passage on a second and final vote for the Wynwood Norte plan that would come after a review by the state that's usually cursory. Quote, "This is a visionary, bold, and gutsy plan," Commissioner Alex Diaz de la Portilla told Hardeman. "This will leave a legacy for the community that will last a long, long time." Backers of the plan, which include longtime Wynwood residents, acknowledge it could substantially transform their neighborhood over time, but they say creeping speculation and gentrification are already changing Wynwood Norte, and the plan represents their best hope of corralling development forces to secure more affordable housing and an improved quality of life for residents. So, yeah, it's interesting. The residents are on board. Unlike most upzoning pushed by developers looking for deep profits in poor neighborhoods, supporters of the Wynwood Norte plan contend their proactive approach will protect renters and its 154 homeowners alike. Quote, "To be clear, nobody's getting kicked out by this plan. To the contrary," said Will Vasquez, who grew up in Wynwood Norte and owns several rental properties in the neighborhood, in recorded comments last week to the City Planning and Zoning Board, which also endorsed the NRD2 plan. Because longstanding zoning rules don't allow sufficient density to make it viable to build on the neighborhood's small lots, there has been virtually no private investment in Wynwood Norte in decades, Vasquez and others say. But as development booms in the south and in midtown Miami to the east, they say developers are already moving in and they fear the lot aggregation and large block redevelopment that's the only way to build under current Miami 21 zoning would displace those who remain. Residents were spurred into action by development plans from a Texas-based developer, Westdale Real Estate Investment Management. The firm bought a block of mostly run-down residential properties in the neighborhood and obtained city zoning approvals for a plan to raise them, meaning tear them down, and build low-scale housing and retail complex aimed at a range of incomes, including so-called workforce housing that goes for higher rents than legally defined affordable housing. With development plans on hold, Westdale agreed to back residents, small property owners, and other neighborhood stakeholders seeking a better deal. Westdale paid for the Wynwood Norte Vision Plan by Pluserbi Suburbia Design, a prominent Miami planning firm. A local Westdale partner joined the new Neighborhood Association board, and Steve Wernick, an attorney who represents the developer, helped shepherd the plan, shaped in numerous neighborhood meetings over 2 years to approval. Wernick said Westdale's involvement in the plan has been minimal, and much of the work on behalf of the association has been as a volunteer. The protections built into the zoning plan will strongly discourage aggregation while fostering small lot infill construction of apartment buildings, townhomes, and duplexes, as well as shops, city planners say. The new rules would grant developers mostly increased capacity to build on those small lots while requiring they set aside 10% of apartments at affordable rents, defined as rates affordable to households making less than 80% of the Miami-Dade County median annual income, now around $60,000. City planners say the new zoning could produce up to 9,000 new apartments, most in buildings of 3 to 5 stories, though some structures could go as high as 12 stories on the neighborhood's edges. As many as 1,400 of those units could be new income-restricted affordable apartments, Wernick said. The Wynwood Norte Neighborhood Revitalization District provides real solutions for Miami's affordable housing crisis that are uniquely tailored to the neighborhood, Wernick, whose firm is in Wynwood, said in a statement released after the commission vote. So, yeah, I mean, I think that 9,000 new apartments and 14,000 of them being income restricted, affordable apartments, I think that's a good thing. I mean, that's a good ratio for sure. It's definitely not a solution to Miami's affordable housing crisis, because we need more along the lines of like 50,000 affordable units in Miami-Dade, but it's definitely a start, so I can't fault them for that. And I think that the fact that the community is involved in this, they've taken their time, they have everybody involved, from the community to the developers to the, the planning departments and all that stuff. I mean, I think that this is the way to do it. I think this is a model for dealing with like gentrification. It's got to be dealt with on a micro scale, I feel, and the community's got to be involved in it, So, yeah, this is an interesting story here. So, keeping it going, the existing zoning has done nothing to stem a population drop or prevent the extensive demolition of homes and commercial buildings, noted Vasquez, whose 92-year-old father still lives in Wynwood Norte. Quote, "We are tired of being ignored and stuck with bad zoning that's keeping the neighborhood down," said Vasquez, who sits on the board of Wynwood Norte, a community enhancement association, the group behind the new plan. The zoning plan was supported by the priest at the local Catholic church, San Juan Bautista Mission, the head of the De Hostos Senior Center, and the director of the Bakehouse Art Complex, which is in Wynwood, a building that houses low-cost art studios and exhibition spaces. Bakehouse interim director Kathy Left, also a member. I'm sorry, actually, Bakehouse is in Wynwood Norte. It's like a big complex of like indoor, outdoor art studios, low-cost art studios, like they said. Also a member of the association, Kathy Left. Board said the rezoning will allow the nonprofit to move forward with plans to build affordable housing for artists and their families on the Bakehouse parking lot. Wynwood Norte consists of a 35-block area that runs between Northwest 29th and 36th Street from Interstate 95 to Miami Avenue in the heart of Miami's historic urban core. So, yeah, this is very interesting here. Keeping it going, we'll finish it off. Formerly known as Little San Juan, the neighborhood at its peak after World War II was home to Puerto Rican garment workers employed in the clothing and shoe industry in the warehouse district of the South. But as the industry in the warehouse district went into a steep decline in the 1980s, the once stable residential enclave became increasingly impoverished and plagued by drug trafficking and high crime. Most of its Puerto Rican population is long gone, but a core of longtime residents has endured through several generations. The Wynwood Norte approach was modeled by the city's first neighborhood revitalization district in the Wynwood Arts District. The Arts District plan, backed by business and property owners, created new zoning to spur development of residential and mixed-use projects on a compatible scale and look in the old warehouse district, which had little housing, in order to make it a true urban neighborhood. That plan has led to construction of half a dozen new projects and has allowed the city to block developers seeking further upzoning, city's planners say. So yeah, I mean, Wynwood and the Wynwood Norte area, I mean, people have been speculating there, buying land, bulldozing them down, selling the land for more, for a long time now. So it's good to see that there's finally some things happening there to try to help out with the situation. So that's it for U.S. real estate news this week, guys. I'm Jake Fletcher with Fletcher Group and RE/MAX Advanced Realty here in Miami, Florida. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at jake.miami. Make sure to hit the subscribe button below, ring the bell so you're notified whenever I release new videos, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Sell smart, buy bold. Peace.